The costume prickled. It wasn't the scratchy felt Vince minded, but the way it seemed to cling, to hum. A green felt hat sat on his head, heavy as if filled with stones. A fake beard itched, smelling faintly of damp earth and something else, something metallic. He tugged at the ridiculous green waistcoat. "Just a costume," he muttered, his voice echoing strangely in the empty dressing room. He looked in the mirror. A stranger stared back, cheeks rouged, eyes unnaturally bright. An unsettling grin stretched across the stranger's face, a grin that lingered even as Vince's own lips settled into a frown. He looked away, heart thudding like a drum in his chest. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and cold. A shiver ran down his spine. This was just a play, just a silly school play. Why did it feel so real? He tried to shake off the feeling, told himself it was just pre-show jitters, but the unease remained, a knot of tension in his stomach. The costume felt different now, as if it had somehow come alive. It wasn't just fabric and thread anymore, but something more, something that pulsed with a life of its own. It was as though the Leprechaun, the mythical creature he was supposed to portray, was reaching out from the fabric, seeping into his skin. The whispers started subtly. At first Vince dismissed them as the rustling of costumes, the murmur of the audience finding their seats. But the whispers persisted, growing louder, clearer. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, slithering around his thoughts, whispering his name. "Vince!" they hissed, their voices like wind chimes in a graveyard. "Vince, we're waiting!" During rehearsals, the stage lights flickered. The prop pot of gold felt strangely warm, pulsing with an inner light. He caught fleeting glimpses of shadows flitting at the edge of his vision, heard the echo of jingling coins when no one was near. The lines of the play, once silly and childish, now felt heavy with meaning, tinged with a dark undercurrent that sent shivers down his spine. The other actors moved around him, oblivious, their faces painted on smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Their laughter sounded hollow, their movements stiff and unnatural. It was as though they were puppets dancing on invisible strings, controlled by some unseen force that sent a chill through Vince's bones. The air thrummed with unseen energy, a palpable force that pressed against him, threatening to suffocate. Then, one night, Mr. Henderson, the drama teacher, smiled, revealing a glint of gold where a canine tooth should be. It wasn't a filling, Vince realized with a jolt, but a solid gold tooth, gleaming under the stage lights like a beacon in the dark. And for a fleeting second, Mr. Henderson's eyes, usually kind and a little weary, flickered with a strange, unsettling light. It was the same predatory gleam he'd seen in the eyes of a fox he'd once encountered in the woods, a look that spoke of ancient hunger and a power beyond human comprehension. Panic welled up inside him, cold and sharp. He stumbled back, bumping into a prop tree. "Vince, you all right, lad?" Mr. Henderson's voice seemed to boom, echoing in the sudden silence. His smile was gone, replaced by a look of concern, but the gold tooth still gleamed, an accusing finger pointing at a truth Vince couldn't quite grasp. He wanted to rip off the costume, to run from the stage, from the whispers and the shadows and the unsettling feeling that something was terribly wrong. But his feet felt rooted to the spot, his limbs heavy and unresponsive. He was trapped, caught in a web of his own making, and the more he struggled, the tighter the web seemed to bind him. The next day, Vince couldn't shake off the chilling encounter with Mr. Henderson. He avoided the drama teacher, but the gleam of that gold tooth haunted him, flickering in his mind like a candle in the darkness. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to investigate. Late at night, he crept into the school's backstage area, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a pounding heart. As he navigated the labyrinth of props and old costumes, he stumbled upon a dusty, full-length mirror, hidden behind a stack of forgotten scenery. Something compelled him to look into it. He wiped away the grime, and his reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed. But then the image began to distort. The reflection of the gold tooth appeared in his own mouth, and his eyes glowed with that same unsettling light he had seen in Mr. Henderson's. Vince recoiled, dropping the flashlight. which clattered to the floor and rolled away, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The whispers from the wings grew louder, more insistent, as if they were trying to tell him something. He pressed his hands to his ears, but the voices penetrated his thoughts, wrapping around his mind like tendrils of smoke. Suddenly the room grew colder, and the mirror's surface rippled like water. Vince's reflection reached out, a spectral hand emerging from the glass. Panic surged through him, but a strange curiosity kept him rooted to the spot. The hand beckoned, and he felt an inexplicable pull towards it. Just as he was about to reach out, the door to the backstage area creaked open and light flooded the room. Vince snapped back to reality. The mirror now just an ordinary dusty piece of glass. He turned to see Mr. Henderson standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Vince, what are you doing here?" Mr. Henderson's voice was calm, almost soothing, but Vince could see the glint of the gold tooth in the dim light. I thought I saw something," Vince stammered, backing away from the mirror. Mr. Henderson's eyes softened, and he stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Vince's shoulder. "Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. Come on, let's get you home." Vince nodded, but as they walked out of the backstage area, he couldn't help but glance back at the mirror. The whispers had stopped, but the unsettling feeling lingered, a shadow that refused to fade. Be sure to like and subscribe to Freddy K Stories to catch the next nightmare come true.